Lovely. I want to just talk to you a little bit about something that has been showing up a great deal in the therapy sessions. And this is this little story of contrast, and it seems to be really coming up a lot right now. And it's kind of putting people off their stride, which is a pity because contrast is something we've always lived with. A contrast is in everything. And contrast actually gives us the opportunity to see something else and to consider the possibility of something else. So let's imagine that we have this opportunity to experience ourselves in a new way because we get to see what we look like in the way that we are presenting now. And similarly, we can also observe the contrast that we notice in others. And then in that reflection, we have an opportunity to choose again for our own being. These words, to choose and choose again, have been so strong. To choose and to choose well. This keeps coming up in the sessions and in meditation. And how do we know what to choose? We only will know what to choose if we know what it is that we don't want to choose. And that's where contrast can really be our greatest gift. So let's look at reflection for a moment. And if we think about reflection, when you're reflecting to me and I'm reflecting to you, we are perceiving the way that it is between us. And I can get a sense of who I am because of the way that you are reflecting back to me. I look in a mirror and I look at my image, and even though it's just a mirror image, I assume that that is how I come across and that's how I look. But in fact, if I were to look through the eyes of every other person that I know, they would all see me in a different way. Based upon the way they see and perceive and understand life and their life, they will see me in that sort of color or that kind of hue or in that sort of way. So that contrast that we get from watching the reflection of each other is really very much based upon who am I and how am I feeling right now. In what kind of space I am in right now will determine how I view the contrast that I'm seeing. So think about this. You know, when we have a situation where someone is badly behaving around us and we're just not in the mood for it, we're probably tired and a little grumpy ourselves. And then it's quick just to go ching and react and get into that reactive mode with the other person and then really make a thing of it. And that's it's always a pity when we're exhausted and they badly behave, then things don't really go so well. But if we're in a good space and we're feeling pretty confident and happy and self-assured and we've had enough sleep and the day's been going pretty well, and someone comes in and they're showing a little bit of behavior, then we can pretty much let it go and we can just love them and laugh a little bit and allow it just to wash over us. What makes all the difference in those situations is me. How am I? How am I feeling and where am I in the alignment of my own inner space? Where am I in my authentic space? And what is my alignment looking like at this point? And that makes all the difference. So here we are, moving along through this life, endeavoring to be in the center place, to be centered, to be grounded, to be connected, so we can be authentic and loving and gracious and fabulous. But the truth is that we're not always in that space, and we're going to shift out of it. Now, what is happening as we are experiencing these shifts in our energy field, and as we are starting to experience ourselves in higher energy frequencies, we start to assume that being in the higher frequency is the best place for us to be. Because when I'm there, I'm really behaving well. I'm nice to everybody around me, and the world seems like a pretty great place to be, and so the energy is just all fabulous. So we endeavor to find that sweet spot, and we endeavor to stay in that sweet spot once we have found it. So let's just think about what that's what is happening in that space and in that mindset. First of all, if I'm endeavoring to hold a sweet spot and I am constantly using my ability to look and view contrast and to adjust and to come into the center point, if I'm trying to maintain that as my only place of being, then right there what I'm doing is I've jumped into a requirement and a performance. So unless it really becomes deeply embedded as my absolute truth, then I'm in a way of trying to look like I'm in a good space. I'm pretending really was what I'm doing, and I'm not being authentic and I'm not being truthful. And I'm setting myself up for a great failure, and at the same time I'm setting up the reality that I'm trying to portray to others, that others may not be out of their sweet space. They may not be a little bit on the edge, because I'm not going to be able to condone that or allow for that. So we have this little requirement thing that goes on. Now remember that the moment we go into requirement, we are going into need, must, should, and have to. And once we start playing in that vibrational field, we've actually dropped our vortex and we're already in a depleting energy cycle. So if I'm requiring of me to be always as stable, strong, and in the center, and thereby requiring of everybody else to be on their best behavior while they're with me, I've set up a little line of mistruth. Instead, it is okay for us to embrace this contrast. So when we reach this higher energy space, we think, oh my gosh, it's so nice to be in this place. I want to stay there. So we have this idea, and I've made a very, very expensive learning tool. So let's imagine that this is you, and this is the balance and the contrast as we might perceive it, like in a teeter-totter, one of those little seesaw type goodies that we played on when we were children. And here we are, and we found our center, and we grounded, and we connected, and we're feeling good about life, and we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, and we've finally got to the place where we think we should be in life, where we can feel fulfilled and fabulous and happy. And we're feeling probably a little bit smug. So here we are. And we try to maintain this as our performance level, our space of being. But in order to stand there and to hold ourselves in the center, if you imagine someone standing, having to hold a balance at a center point, they would have to put their legs down on one side and on the other. So can you see that you would have one foot on this side, one foot on that side, so that the center of your body was holding the center point? That means that we are having to make sure that we don't step down too hard on the one side and too hard on the other. So constantly we are creating these small adjustments. How do we make an adjustment? It's through observing how we're doing. How do we know what we're doing? We have to have some kind of contrast. Something has to be different so that we can make these little adjustments. And we can choose now to stand with our weight in a different way. More to here or more to there. And in this constant adjusting, I'm actually in flow. Because the flow is happening in life. Now imagine if we get the balance so perfectly right, and we can absolutely stand there in the still point, and we can just be in alignment. It really isn't a reality for where we are right now. And if you were to see this perhaps like a muscle, and if you imagine a muscle on our arm, when you look at that muscle. So when you're pulling in and you contracting your limb, you're pulling your muscle up into like a little ball. And when you extend, the muscle sort of flattens out and elongates, and so it's a smoother line over here. And imagine that if we were to constantly be doing this and this. We would be exercising pretty much like a bodybuilder, and we would be pulling in and extending the muscle, and we would be bringing and pumping energy into it and oxygen and all the other good things, blood, and so we would be helping to develop this muscle. But if we never develop the muscle, say we decided just to let our arm always just be in the long, elongated, stretched out position, and we never ever pulled it back, and we never exercised it, never flexed our muscle, and we only ever had this way of being and showing up, this muscle would just get flabby. It would no longer be able to contract and expand and be in flow and develop its strength. Well, the same thing here. Imagine if we were just standing in that still point and we said, oh, I've hit the sweet spot and this is where I'm going to stay in here, in the sweet spot. And I never allow myself to experience the tipping, the contrast, and the ability to adjust, and the potential to choose. And I'm just standing absolutely still in this point. What I've really done here is I've created another box, a container for me to show up in. But I can only show up in this little box, in this little format, in this little role, which I've now made very, very small, because I'm not willing to feel the flow of life and to experience the contrasts that are happening in my life. I'm not willing to allow for me to have these adjustments, and thereby I'm not willing to allow for others to have the adjustments either. So think about what that is. If I'm not willing to allow for me to be adjusting, and I'm not willing for another to also have that experience, then I'm immediately stepping into that space in my being where there is judgment, shame, and blame. Very low, depleting energy. Yeah, we need to hear that one. So, as we begin to choose to stay in our center, and as we begin to choose again, and to keep choosing and to choose well, we are developing a very acute awareness of what it is that is moving in the world. And the more we choose, it's like having a dial on one of those old radios where you just turn the dial and you try and find that sweet point where the static is not going crazy. And you can find that sweet point and you can stand in that sweet point. But we are having to adjust to the waves of sound waves that come wandering across so that we can tune into it. Think about what that is. Tuning in, adjusting. It's what we need to keep sharp and clear, and to keep our imaginations moving in a way that we are willing to experience more. This whole journey that we are moving towards transformation, expansion, it is to know more, to know something else. To know something else requires that there be contrast. And in this amazing world that we're living in right now, where there is this sense of duality and contrast, it is giving us that opportunity to look carefully and to think about what it is that we really and truly would love to choose. And in the choosing of this, we find we are able to do a little wobbly and to release resentment, judgment, shame, blame, self-persecution, other persecution. And we're willing to stand in a more authentic space that is not a still place that is boxed in again, but it is a still point into which we are constantly adjusting, correcting, and coming back, so that in this life we learn to develop the muscle to choose, and we choose for our highest best. Oh, a lot of blah blah. Now it's time for tea. Oh, thankfully for me, I have some tea here. So this is Joy Truscott, and I wish you so much love, heart and soul, and we'll talk about more as we go on. So many blessings, so much love.